Welcome, friends. We're so glad to have you here. We've prepared some incredible stories that we hope you'll enjoy. If you do, and you'd like to support the channel and help it grow, please consider subscribing. Your support means the world to us. I've always been a night owl. There's something comforting about the silence after midnight. Just me, my thoughts, and the occasional scroll through Instagram. I'm not famous, but my account has a decent following. I post photos of sunsets, my dog, and coffee mugs with cheesy captions. It's nothing special, but it's mine. Last week, I posted a picture of the woods behind my house. The sun was setting, and the trees looked like jagged shadows against the orange sky. I captioned it, "Nature's calm before the night," and went to bed feeling accomplished. The next morning, there was a new comment. @SilentFollower12, "Beautiful spot, perfect for watching you." I stared at the comment for a moment, confused. It felt off. Clicked the profile. No posts, no followers, just a blank profile picture and a bio that read, "I like the quiet." Creepy, but trolls are everywhere. I deleted the comment and blocked the account. I thought that was the end of it. 2 nights later, I was scrolling again when a new notification popped up. @SilentFollower12 started following you. My stomach flipped, the same username, the same blank profile. I double-checked. I had blocked them. How were they back? My heart pounded as I blocked them again. This time, I set my profile to private. The next day, a DM request appeared. @Silent.Follower12, "You can't hide where you live. I see you." I froze. My profile didn't have my locations, and I rarely posted anything identifying, except that photo of the woods. My chest tightened. I grabbed my phone, scrolled through the photo, and noticed something I hadn't seen before. Near the edge of the picture, behind a tree, was a faint outline, a figure. It could have been a trick of the light, but the more I stared, the more certain I became it was a person. I deleted the post and called my best friend Megan. She's always the logical one. "Don't freak out," she said. "Probably someone messing with you. Just report it to Instagram." I reported the account, but I didn't sleep that night. I kept checking my windows, convinced I'd see someone lurking outside. The woods suddenly felt too close, like they were pressing against the house. The next day, I tried to shake it off. I ran errands, met Megan for coffee, and told myself it was all in my head. By the time I got home, it was almost dark. I locked the doors, closed the curtains, and settled on the couch to watch a movie. Halfway through, my phone buzzed. A new DM, "Silent.Follower12, you forgot the back door." I jumped off the couch, my hands shaking. I ran to the kitchen and froze. The back door was wide open, swinging slightly in the breeze. My chest felt like it would explode. I grabbed a knife from the counter and dialed 911. The operator kept me on the line while they sent an officer. I locked myself in the bathroom. The knife clutched so tightly my fingers hurt. When the police arrived, they searched the house and the yard but found nothing. "Probably just a prank," the officer said, though he didn't look convinced. He offered to have a patrol car drive by a few times that night. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Megan came over. She brought coffee and tried to cheer me up. "Maybe you should stay with me for a few days," she suggested. I was about to agree when my phone buzzed again. "Running away won't help. I'll always find you." I showed Megan the message, and her face went pale. "We're going to the police," she said firmly. At the station, the officer took my statement and the screenshots. They traced the account, but whoever it was used a VPN. The officer assured me they'd do their best, but there wasn't much to go on. "Stay somewhere safe," he advised. That night, I packed a bag and went to Megan's. Her apartment felt safer. 3 floors up, no woods in sight. We locked the door and double-checked the windows. Around 2 a.m., my phone buzzed. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't ignore it. "Silent.12, nice place. I like the fire escape." I dropped the phone. Megan grabbed it, her eyes wide. "How do they know?" We called the police again, but by the time they arrived, there was no sign of anyone. They promised to increase patrols, but their words felt hollow. For the next few days, Megan and I didn't go anywhere alone. I stopped posting on Instagram entirely, but the messages didn't stop. "Silent.Follower12, I miss your posts. Do you feel me watching? You look tired. You should sleep." Each one felt like a noose tightening around my neck. The police were out of leads. They told me to stay vigilant and keep my phone on me at all times. Last night, I woke up to a sound outside Megan's window, a faint tapping. She stirred beside me, and we both held our breath, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't the wind. Megan grabbed her phone to call 911 while I crept to the window. My hands trembled as I peeked through the curtain. There was nothing there. The police arrived again, checked the area, and found no one. But this time, they didn't leave right away. The officer stood outside, scanning the street, while we tried to calm down. Then Megan's phone buzzed. At Silent Follower 12, I told you I like the quiet. That's when I snapped. I wasn't going to keep living in fear. I opened the app, screenshot the message, and handed it to the officer. "We can use this," he said, nodding. "We're setting up a trap tonight." The plan was simple. Megan and I would return to her apartment like normal. The officers would park an unmarked car outside and keep watch while plainclothes officers patrolled the building. If the stalker showed up, they'd be ready. That night, we acted like everything was fine. We ordered pizza, turned on a movie, and tried to ignore the tension in the air. Around midnight, I got another message. At Silent.Follower 12, the fire escape again. Cute trap. My blood ran cold. How did they know? Before I could panic, the officer texted me, "Stay calm. We've got this." Minutes later, I heard a commotion outside. The creak of metal, muffled voices, and then a loud crash. Megan and I froze as footsteps pounded up the stairs. We barely had time to process it before an officer knocked on the door. "It's over," he said. "We got him." Stalker had tried to climb the fire escape to get to the window again, but this time he was met by officers waiting on the landing. He fought back, but they tackled him to the ground. When they searched him, they found a knife and a small notebook filled with details about me, my schedule, places I'd been, and even pictures he'd printed from my Instagram. When I saw his face, I didn't recognize him. He was just some random guy, but the look in his eyes chilled me to my core. He smiled as they dragged him away. "It's not over," he said. "You'll miss me." But it is over. The police told me he'd been stalking me for weeks, maybe longer. They're charging him with harassment, stalking, and attempted breaking and entering. He won't be bothering me, or anyone else, for a long time. I deleted my Instagram and moved to a new apartment in another city. Megan and I still talk about that night sometimes, but we try not to dwell on it. I'm rebuilding my life, and I refuse to let fear control me.
When my buddy Chris invited me to his family's cabin for the weekend, I was all in. Work had been killing me, and I needed a break. Plus, the idea of fresh air sounded better than the stale aroma of ramen and regret that filled my apartment. The cabin was deep in the woods, far from the city, a perfect spot to unplug and relax. Or so I thought. We got there late Friday night. The cabin was cozy but smelled faintly of mothballs and wet socks. Chris cracked open a beer, and we spent the evening grilling burgers and scrolling Instagram. I posted a picture of the lake under the moonlight, captioned, "Weekend Vibes Unplugged." Within minutes, a comment popped up from my girlfriend, Emma. "Jealous, bring me back some s'mores." Chris raised an eyebrow. "Bro, we're supposed to be unplugging," I shrugged. "Hey, nature doesn't get likes." The next morning, we went hiking. By hiking, I mean I wheezed my way uphill while Chris laughed and left me in the dust. The woods were quiet, too quiet. No birds, no wind, just me and my chili from last night, making its presence known. "Dude, really?" Chris groaned, waving a hand in front of his face. "We're in nature, and you're polluting it." "It's the circle of life," I wheezed. That night, as we sat by the fire, I couldn't help but joke about how creepy the woods were. "This is like the perfect setting for a horror movie," I said, taking a swig of my soda. Next thing you know, some guy in a mask shows up and PFF'd. The soda came out my nose. Chris laughed so hard he nearly fell out of his chair. "Man, you'd scare the stalker away before he even got to us." We turned in late, and I passed out as soon as my head hit the pillow. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to a weird sound outside, a low, rumbling noise. My heart raced. Was it a bear? A serial killer? Nope, it was Chris letting one rip in his sleep. The next morning, I posted a picture of the sunrise over the lake with the caption, "Nature's alarm clock." It got a few likes, but But then I noticed a comment from some random account. Silent breezer. Nice view. I like the smell of the woods. Chris, I said, holding up my phone. Look at this. He squinted at the screen. Probably a troll. You posted the lake, dude. Anyone could figure out where we are. Yeah, but the smell part? Chris shrugged. You did eat chili. That night, I heard footsteps outside the cabin. My stomach dropped, or maybe it was the chili again. Chris, I whispered. He snored in response. I grabbed my phone and crept to the window. Using the flashlight app, I shined a beam into the yard. Nothing, just trees and Chris's car. And then I heard it, a loud, unmistakable fart echoing in the silence. Chris? I hissed. What? He groaned, sitting up and rubbing his eyes. Did you just— No, man, that wasn't me. We froze, staring at each other. The noise came again, louder this time. It wasn't human. It was otherworldly. Nature is mad at us, Chris whispered. We grabbed a flashlight and a broom handle, don't ask, and crept outside. The sound grew louder as we approached the edge of the woods. And then we saw it, a raccoon stuck in an empty bean can. I laughed so hard I almost dropped the flashlight. Chris, in his infinite bravery, managed to free the poor thing, which immediately farted again and bolted into the woods. Wildlife, man, Chris muttered as we went back inside. But the relief didn't last long. The next day I got another notification on Instagram. Silent breezer. You left the back door unlocked. Chris and I stared at each other. You did lock it, right? He asked. Of course I did. Wait, no, I didn't. The rest of the weekend was a mess of paranoia and stomach aches. Every creak of the cabin made us jump. Every fart made us question if the stalker, or worse, the raccoon, had returned for revenge. By Sunday morning, we'd had enough. We packed up and left, vowing never to eat chili at a cabin again. As we drove home, my phone buzzed one last time. Can't wait for next weekend. Don't forget the beans. Chris and I deleted our social media accounts on the spot.
I had always wanted to escape the city for a while, to trade the constant noise and light pollution for something quieter, more grounded. When I found an online listing for an old farmhouse in upstate New York, I booked it without hesitation. The photos promised rolling fields, a wraparound porch with creaky wooden chairs, and a fireplace that begged for a book and a blanket. It was exactly what I needed to clear my mind. The farmhouse was tucked away at the end of a narrow dirt road, surrounded by dense woods. When I arrived, it was late afternoon, and the golden sunlight filtered through the trees, painting everything in warm hues. The house was just as charming as the pictures, with its weathered white paint and the faint smell of pine in the air. The host had left a note on the kitchen counter. Welcome, make yourself at home. The house is old, so you might hear a creak or two. Don't mind it, it's just the place settling. Enjoy your stay. I smiled and set my bag down. Silence was immediate and almost shocking. No honking horns, no distant chatter, just the occasional chirp of a bird and the rustle of leaves in the wind. After unpacking, I lit a fire in the hearth and settled into an armchair with a book. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the house seemed to grow cozier. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows on the walls, and for the first time in months, I felt completely at ease. But as the night deepened, quiet began to change. At first it was subtle, just the faintest sound, like a soft tapping. I assumed it was a branch against the window, but when I checked, the trees outside were still. I returned to my chair, brushing it off as my imagination. After all, the house was old, and old houses make noise. Around midnight, I decided to head to bed. The bedroom was on the second floor, with a view of the moonlit fields. The bed was firm but comfortable, the kind that makes you sink just enough to feel safe. I fell asleep quickly, but something woke me a few hours later. It was faint at first, a rhythmic thumping sound, almost like footsteps, but slower and lighter. It seemed to come from beneath me, somewhere on the first floor. I lay perfectly still, straining to listen. The sound grew louder, then stopped altogether. I told myself it was probably an animal. The host had mentioned that the area was home to raccoons and squirrels, and they were known to get into crawl spaces. But something about the rhythm of the noise didn't sit right with me. In the morning, the house was peaceful again. The sun poured through the windows, and the fields outside looked like a postcard. I made coffee and sat on the porch, trying to convince myself that I had overreacted. But as I sipped my coffee, I noticed something odd, a small, almost imperceptible mark on the wooden floorboards near the door. It was faint, but it looked like a scuff, as if something heavy had been dragged across the floor. I bent down to examine it, but there was nothing else out of place. The day passed uneventfully. I explored the nearby woods, took photos of the fields, and read by the fire as the sun set. But when night fell, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't entirely alone. Around 10 p.m., as I was brushing my teeth, I heard it again, the faint tapping sound, followed by the same rhythmic thumping. This time it wasn't coming from downstairs. It was coming from directly beneath the bathroom floor. My heart raced as I crouched down, pressing my ear to the tiles. The sound was clearer now, almost deliberate, like someone or something was moving below the house. I grabbed my phone and turned on the flashlight, searching for any sign of an entry point. That's when I noticed the small wooden hatch in the hallway, flush with the floorboards. It was barely big enough for a person to fit through, but it was slightly ajar. The host hadn't mentioned a basement. Summoning every ounce of courage I had, I pulled the hatch open. A cold draft hit me immediately, carrying with it the faint smell of earth and damp wood. The flashlight beam illuminated a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. "Hello?" I called, my voice trembling. No response. The rational part of me screamed to close the hatch and leave, but curiosity got the better of me. I descended the stairs slowly, the old wood creaking beneath my weight. At the bottom, the air was even colder. The space was small, more of a crawl space than a basement, with low ceilings and dirt floors. My flashlight swept across the room, and I froze. In the corner, partially hidden behind a stack of old crates, was a wooden chair. It was tipped over, and the ground around it was scuffed, as if someone had been sitting there and abruptly left. I turned to leave, but something caught my eye. Carved into the back of the chair were the words, "Still here." My blood ran cold. I scrambled up the stairs, slammed the hatch shut, and placed the heaviest piece of furniture I could find on top of it. That night, I didn't sleep. At dawn, I packed my bags and left without looking back. When I got home, I emailed the host asking if they knew about the basement. Their reply came quickly, "There's no basement." I never went back. It all started with my hunt for a winter jacket. I'd been putting it off for weeks, but the cold snap that hit in January made it impossible to delay any longer. My old jacket, patched and worn, wasn't cutting it anymore. The outlet mall was only a short drive from my place, and I figured it would have plenty of options without breaking the bank. It was a Friday evening, just after work. The outlet mall was quieter than I'd expected, probably because of the bitter cold. Most of the shops had bright window displays, promising post-holiday sales, but foot traffic was sparse. The cold wind followed me from the parking lot as I stepped into the first store, a big box retailer that seemed promising. I browsed the racks for a while but found nothing I liked. Either the jackets were too expensive or they didn't feel warm enough. I moved on to the next store, then the next. After an hour of wandering and striking out, I was about to call it a night. The mall wasn't particularly large, but I hadn't noticed anything else worth checking out. That's when I spotted it. A shop tucked away in a corner I didn't remember seeing before. The sign above the door read, "Bishop & Co. Outfitters." It looked different from the other stores. The windows weren't plastered with sale signs or flashy displays. Instead, the glass was slightly fogged, as if from a heater running inside, and I could just make out wooden racks and mannequins in heavy wool coats. The place had an old-fashioned vibe, like something from the 1940s. Curious, I pushed the door open. A small bell jingled above me, and a wave of warm air greeted me. The interior smelled faintly of cedar and leather. The lighting was soft, almost dim, and the floors were polished wood that creaked slightly underfoot. Rows of coats hung neatly on racks, ranging from classic trench coats to heavy parkas. Everything looked meticulously organized, with hand-lettered price tags hanging from thick twine. A man stood behind the counter near the back of the store. He was tall, with neatly combed gray hair and a sharp suit that looked as old-fashioned as the rest of the shop. He smiled when he saw me. "Good evening," he said, his voice smooth and polite. Looking for something warm, I assume? Yeah, a winter jacket, I replied, glancing around. Your store wasn't here the last time I visited. He chuckled softly. We're a bit of a hidden gem. Not many people notice us unless they need to. The comment struck me as odd, but I didn't dwell on it. I started browsing, running my fingers over the thick fabrics. The coats were beautifully made, with heavy stitching and luxurious linings. They weren't cheap, but they looked like they could last a lifetime. One coat in particular caught my eye, a long, dark gray wool jacket with a high collar. It was simple but elegant, and when I tried it on, it fit like it had been made for me. The material was warm but not bulky, and the pockets were deep enough to hold gloves or a phone. This is perfect, I said, glancing at the price tag. Surprisingly, it wasn't as expensive as I'd expected. The man smiled again. An excellent choice. That coat suits you. He rang me up on an old-fashioned cash register, the kind with mechanical buttons and a loud bell. The transaction was quick, and before I knew it, I was back outside, cold biting at my face. I hurried to my car, eager to try out the coat properly. The moment I slipped it on again, I felt warmer than I had in weeks. It was like the coat had its own insulation, something better than any synthetic lining. The next day, I told a friend about the shop. She lived nearby and was always on the lookout for unique stores. What was it called again? She asked. Bishop & Co. Outfitters, I said. She frowned. I've been to that mall 100 times. I've never seen that store. It's in the corner near the west entrance, I explained. Later that week, I decided to stop by the shop again to see if they had anything else interesting. But when I got to the west entrance, I froze. The store wasn't there. The space where it had been was now boarded up, with a for lease sign hanging crookedly on the plywood. I stared at it, confused. There was no way I'd imagined it. I asked one of the nearby shop employees about it, but they shrugged. That spot's been empty for years, they said. Feeling unsettled, I went home and pulled the jacket out of my closet. I hadn't noticed it before, but there was a small label sewn into the lining near the collar. It read, Bishop & Co. Outfitters, established 1897. The date sent a chill down my spine. I tried searching online for the store, but the results were sparse. The only mention I found was a brief article about a family-owned outfitter that had closed down decades ago. The location matched the outlet mall, but the article said the business had shuttered in 1953 after a fire destroyed most of their stock. I didn't know what to think. The jacket was real. It was hanging in my closet. But the shop and the man who sold it to me seemed to have vanished. To this day, I still wear the coat. It's the warmest jacket I've ever owned, and it hasn't aged a day. But every so often, when I'm walking alone on a cold night, I swear I can smell cedar and leather, just faintly, like a memory lingering in the air.